Marketing often talks at small businesses, but it doesn't really listen.
Vodafone are largely perceived as telecoms infrastructure for big businesses, and we really want to be seen as a growth partner for small and medium businesses in the UK. So it's clear to us we really need to do something different.
74% of SMBs don't even really feel that advertising reflects their reality.
Using FlightLab testing, we spotted one critical nuance.
SMBs and founders weren't responding to abstract language.
But what they did respond to were consequences, lived examples, and founder-to-founder experiences.
They wanted voices they could relate to, connect with, and trust.
Human connection.
Connection. Human connection.
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 Connection to people.
So we put 27 business owners in a room.
This is Business.Connected from Vodafone.
10 long-form episodes. Over 150 short-form assets.
Real talk, tips, and takeaways from real founders. And the results spoke for themselves.
That's the trait of a true entrepreneur, just someone that keeps going and is just disciplined in all parts of their life.
There's a continuous journey of learning and having a humility to be proven wrong.
It's always good to stay grounded and to be like, actually, there's still a long way to go.
Wow, those people in the video look just like us.
Yeah. We play it.
We'll just let it run.
Yeah.
So the numbers speak for themselves, but let's find out exactly what went on behind the scenes here. We assume that with this campaign, we had a lot of testing happen, and usually we assume that this happens in the creative, in the hooks, in the post-production. But what we don't spend a lot of time talking about is the pre-production. Now, FlightLab does a lot of this to help us sort of sharpen the thinking in pre-production. Maz, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do to understand your audience before the campaign even begins?
100%. I think the first and most important point is that understanding your audience doesn't actually start at the campaign or at the briefing phase. For us, it's about understanding the audience way beforehand. As a media owner, we spend an enormous amount of time getting into the heads and hearts of our audiences, and that's sort of the core ethos around all the tech that we've built in FlightLab, which is what Poppy just referenced there. That's a suite of tech that we have, and all of that is built in a sort of mission to understanding our audiences better. And I think when it comes to that briefing phase, to that campaign phase, we're thinking about how can we leverage that tech that ultimately we have built to scale our shows, so our podcasts, for brand owners, so that we're able to get to our audiences a little bit quicker and a little bit better.
Beautiful. So it sounds like a lot of the work that you're doing is trying to kill the guesswork between what the audience actually wants and what they think that they want. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing, killing the guesswork, is this phrase that we have at FlightStory, and it's all about leaving your assumptions at the door. I've actually had a lot of talks over the last 2 days at MadFest around this idea of not assuming what your audience want, and that's very, very important to us as well. And so killing the guesswork for us is about not relying on the audience sort of telling us what they want in this traditional format of a survey, or asking them a question and expecting them to respond, and that's sort of, we take that at face value, but doing everything that we can up front, early doors, to lead the creative in a way that is really, really true to what they actually need to see.
Love it. And I think that as you're speaking about leaving your assumptions at the door, it's a good time to chat to you, Jordan, about Vodafone, safe to say, is a huge brand, and you've talked to the small to medium business market audience for years, yourself alone, 10 plus.
Almost 10.
Happy
10.
anniversary.
Thank you.
And what did you have to unlearn about your assumptions about what those audiences really wanted?
Well, I think it's coming back to something you said, which is I don't think we really truly understood what they want from a brand like us. We had lots of assumptions. We had layer upon layer of audience data, but we were also used to speaking to large businesses. We were in large corporates in different categories, and we really didn't get under the skin of small and medium businesses. And we got so far with surveys, and we got so far with white papers, but when we started to actually ask and understand the behaviors of small businesses and founders through a lot of the tools that you provided, we really understood the intent. What do they yearn for? What do they want? What really matters to a founder who's got to do marketing and sales and keep the lights on and worry about cash flow? And we weren't used to speaking to that audience. We were used to speaking about productivity and security and these other big business themes and digitization and all of these things, but you have to speak a very different language and be valuable to a very different part of the business market. So that was the one thing that we had to change in our thinking, which is let's really get under the skin of this audience, and working with you guys gave us a way of doing that.
Which is amazing, because it can be quite surprising what you uncover. And on the flip of that, Maz, like if Vodafone's unlearning things, what were you learning throughout the campaign? What's something that surprised you?
Yeah, I think the main one, actually probably for all of us, was we'd had, as part of the briefing process, we'd had some insights shared with us through research that Vodafone had done around like how business owners and audiences connect with large organizations, and it's like the headline is that they don't. And so that was like an interesting thing to have to deal with, because we are a large organization. So how do we speak to them in a way that's going to make sense for them? And the thing that we learned through the testing that we did with FlightLab was that actually wasn't the case. It wasn't that they didn't connect with large organizations or what they were putting out. It was the framing that needed to change. So previously, what you'll see from a lot of B2B brands is like very corporate speak, very functional messaging. And what we found in the testing, that there were like up to 9% discrepancies in just like the same theme framed slightly differently. And so that was really, really interesting, and that sort of massively impacted the creative direction that we took with the partnership that you just saw there. So that was a big one, and we're taking that learning and applying it sort of in any future work that we do as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, some of the research that we did do found that it was because of that language and that lack of connection that only about 10% of small businesses actually felt a real connection, or felt that a big business like our brand could be thinking about the little guy. And so there was no emotional connection, there was no relevance, and my biggest challenge as a member of the brand team is how do we become relevant, how do we move that brand connection and move the brand consideration. And in realizing that, this is how we uncovered what I think was a fairly successful campaign.
I like to think so. We won a drum award. So
yes, yeah. And 470 million impressions, pretty good. You can clap if you would like. Woohoo! Amazing. So as we're talking about testing and research, anybody who has read The Cost of Dull, which seems to be a big talking point at MadFest today, give me a little hand raise if you've read it. Oh, we've got 3 people. Everybody else, you've got homework. But spoiler alert, what you'll find out is that the cost of dull work is damaging. Technically, anybody can make things faster, cheaper than ever. But the real danger isn't bad work, it's forgettable work. So, Maz, talk to me. What do you think this work would have looked like if you hadn't have tested?
I think, yeah, the cost of dull, sort of forgettable, is a good word for it. I think coming back to what I was saying earlier around like corporate jargon, the very functional messaging, we absolutely would have fallen into that trap. And I think the other angle here is that we at FlightStory, we build podcasts, right? We build podcast brands, we build creator brands. And so I think without taking a sort of look under the hood between what we had from Vodafone from a research and insight perspective, and then what we had in terms of everything that we know about connecting with audiences, it would have been really, really easy for us to just make another business podcast that had a host who had maybe scaled a business themselves and had been through all the trials and tribulations of being a business owner. And actually, that would have been very boring to our consumer and to our audience, because that isn't what they want to hear. They've had enough of that. And so it was quite nice to do something a little bit different.
Absolutely. No hate to anybody in the room who has started their own personal business podcast. We will listen afterwards. So chatting about the spirit of experimentation and testing and learning. Jordan, what is the hardest thing that a big brand like Vodafone has to give up to make something that people genuinely care about?
The job that I had to do was convince the business to give up a little bit of control. We're used to being, brand first, message first, and we had a lot of evidence that approach just wasn't working. You could see it in stagnation of our awareness wasn't a problem, consideration was, right? So we had to convince the business that what we were doing currently is not necessarily working. And we had to take a pretty big creative swing, with, as I'm sure everyone in the room is facing pretty tight budgets. And we also had to play where this audience is, which is not your traditional kind of through-the-line advertising. And this actually was last year our major piece of brand advertising and work. And so it took a lot of convincing, I would say, up the chain. Let's make this investment. Let's fish where the fish are. Let's be in the platforms where founders and SMBs spend their time, and let's speak to them and connect with them in a way that they would find useful. And trust me, all the other good stuff is going to come after that. So the brand consideration will follow if we show ourselves to be useful and not just talk about ourselves and purely the stuff that we sell. So that's kind of the problem that we had to deal with.
And what sort of advice would you give to people in the room who are in a similar position where they've got an amazing idea or their agency has an amazing idea, but they're not sure how to champion that experimentation internally?
The experimentation made our jobs a little bit easier, because we were able to... one of the most terrifying things about making something like this is that it was unscripted, it was founder to founder, but we walked into the shoots and let the cameras roll with the confidence that, because prior to that we had tested, and keep me honest here, thousands of questions and themes and conversation hooks. That ethos of take out the guesswork. So we walked into the room and let the cameras roll with a degree of confidence that we were going to get what we wanted on the back end. And from that, we were going to be able to fashion this brand building campaign that would last a year, 10 episodes, all of those different media bursts and creative variations, because the experimentation took out the guesswork. And I would encourage, and it was also there's one other thing, the thing that always drives me nuts whenever I have our friends from Meta come join us, and they're like, try a bunch of different variations, pay for your ad campaign, put it live, let the platform optimize, and try it. And that's sometimes, you have to experiment, you have to spend money to experiment, and you might find something useful and might not. And this was a way from us in the pre-production phase of really honing in on what's important, letting the cameras roll, and not waiting until after you run a campaign to find out which creative was the most optimized, which had the best media metrics, which delivered the biggest lifts. We walked into the shoots ready to go, and it's because we front-ended a lot of that experimentation.
Was there a moment where you were like, this is absolutely paid off?
At the end of the year. But because we exited the year. We exited the year actually on our main brand tracker with an 8-point uplift in brand consideration, which was pretty decent. And we went from 4th in our category to the number 1 in terms of the trusted digital partner, positioning. And that was ultimately the whole brand goal of this campaign. So that was a light bulb moment at the end. But actually, all the successive bursts started to stack up, from the media performance, from our brand lifts with every successive burst, as well as some of the softer engagement metrics. Like we saw a rise in our YouTube subscriber base. We saw click-throughs going up. And again, this was not optimized for clicking through to the website, or this was not optimized for performance, but it fell off the back end by making stuff that people found slightly interested and wanted to spend time with. So the evidence started to stack up, and then, as I say, we exited the year on a pretty good note.
I'm going to actually jump in here because I'm going to say that for us, from a FlightStory perspective, and the evidence started stacking up a little bit earlier, I'm going to say, Jordan. And
I thought you'd say that.
That for us was actually during the shoot. So we had 3 shoots for this campaign, and in shoot 1, bearing in mind that what we were ultimately trying to do was resonate with the audience, was the founders that had sat down together, so we had 3 founders as part of each episode, came away as friends, and they'd really connected on that shoot. And so that for us was an early signal that what we were doing was facilitating real and honest conversation, which was ultimately going to resonate with other people that were like them. So I was pretty happy when the brand results came back, but I like to think I knew it was going to happen. So yeah.
I love that.
I would classify that as an anecdotal finding. But yes, it was lovely. Actually, there is some truth to that. When the founders, as we're shown in the sizzle, you started to see those connections play out, and real connections and real relationships in real time across LinkedIn, them supporting each other. To now support what you say, yeah, it started to be, in the real world, this is actually what founders and small businesses thrive on. It really is that founder-to-founder connectivity. And again, it reinforced the insights that we started with, which is, well, if we were speaking big telco and business language, that's not what makes these guys tick. but it's the problem solving in the real world, and to see that play out, yeah, that was a good signal.
It sounds like FlightLab has been a great tool to be able to spend more time focusing on that human connection and helping these founders and doing more of that sort of upfront work. What I'm desperate to know, and I'm sure you guys are all absolutely desperate to know as well, is are there any new developments for FlightLab in the works?
Great question, Poppy.
Do you want me to take that one?
No, that one's for Maz.
That's for me, Jordan. That's for me. Yes, there are always developments in FlightLab. So I think probably the main one and sort of the most obvious use case that we use with most of our brand partners is that we use FlightLab to test our host reads and our creatives before they go, before they're sort of published and out in the world. So that for us is a way of reassuring our brand partners that we can look at we can sort of gear our creative to specific results earlier on in the process. And so that's sort of a smaller scale example of how you'd be able to use FlightLab, but a bigger scale example would be a partnership like this, where we take all of the themes and the kind of content we want to use with specific people, and we put that into testing nice and early. Beyond that, we've got lots and lots of different tech. We've got a new department out of FlightLab called Flight Socials, which if you are interested in scaling short-form content, making viral short-form content, we are your people. Come and chat to us after. But essentially, it's a suite of tech that helps you kill the guesswork, get ahead of things really nice and early, and understand your audience a little bit better so that you can make better work for them.
Sold.
Well, I was actually going to say, as a client, like the value. Vodafone, we have lots of different tools. That we have Dragonfly, we have Creative. We have a number of tools where we can do a lot of pre-flight testing of creative, and what I hope is maybe coming through here is this was a different layer of understanding. It wasn't about the brilliant basics of platform and creative. This was about content. This was about resonance. This was about really understanding the connection between audience intent and what we were creating and taking a big creative swing on. And so all of the tools that Maz just covered, they gave us a richness of data that, as I say, is like once we're playing a content game here and not an advertising game, which was a big investment for us as a brand. And it's something slightly terrifying when you're used to making a lot of ads and you just let the cameras roll. Again, we had to make our own luck, but I'd say on the back end, everything kind of worked out. So there was a value of that data that you provided, that we just weren't getting from any other place.
Yeah, absolutely. We went on that journey together, didn't we?
Sure did.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I loved it. I wanted to talk to you guys about the theme of what we're talking about today, which is how can AI help humans stop making dull, ignorable work? Jordan, we'll start with you. You once referred to this project as a love letter to small to medium-sized business owners, and they felt that love. And how do you think that AI can help humans stop making dull work?
Yeah, I guess it saved time having conversations about things that maybe didn't matter. We had a lot of look, it didn't do away with the need for creative instincts and craft and all of the things that go into making good work. But what it did do is it meant that we could really hone in, and we took again, not to repeat what you said, but the guesswork out of when we landed on the 9 themes or 10 episodes, 9 themes that we were going to talk about. We were absolutely sure that these are the most important 9 themes that we want to talk about across our episodes and all of the short form clips. And then it meant that we could spend our time making the very best, content and advertising around those themes, rather than endlessly debating, oh, should it be this, should it be that? The sales manager wants us to talk about online safety and not that. We were able to walk into that and focus on the creative and not focus on things that might otherwise be distractions.
Yeah, I think sort of to build on that, I think not using a system like this meant that we would have had to rely quite heavily on asking our audience for their input, for them to tell us explicitly what they want to see from us. And I think in an environment where we're already working really, really hard to get their attention, to then ask them to form a fully fledged thought on what they actually want to see and assume that that's actually what they need to see, puts quite a lot of responsibility back on the audience, and actually isn't fair, because ultimately we're there to serve them and to give them something that is valuable to them. And so the use of AI in this context allowed us to look at their behavior and their action and let that steer the decision making, as opposed to sort of making a focus group and getting them in and asking them questions, which I think is still a really valuable way to go. But in what we were trying to achieve, that probably wasn't going to be the way that we were going to achieve that.
Absolutely. It sounds like what you've both said there is that the way to make not ignorable, the way to make really awesome work is to figure out what your audience wants and actually make it for them. That is us done. You guys can go to the pub. Thank you so much.
No, don't be going to the pub yet. We got one more amazing speaker. Let's everybody stay calm.
You can't go. But thank you.
Thank you.